All right. Okay. Cool. So we are live. Welcome everybody. So anybody watching now, anybody watching later, I've got my friend Dr. Christopher Tomaszewski here. I just call you Christopher. Uh, yeah. We've got stuff to talk about with this debate. I know, it's only been a week, and already I've seen online there's a two different camps. One is like we're sick and tired of hearing about this. I don't know if you've seen the same stuff online, and the other is
Yes.
they're still going and going and going and kind of just really like aggravating each other's. So what's been your experience since this, and then we'll get into like kind of what we're going to do today in this video.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess I should back up and just explain my experience a little bit before that, which was, um, originally the debate was supposed to be uh, Trent versus Jay Dyer, one on one.
Hmm.
Jay insisted on having uh, Father Deacon Ananias, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly,
Hmm.
as his philosophy partner in the debate
Hmm.
anyway. So, in the interest of fairness, that entitled Trent to a partner. So I was having tea with my wife in London. We were on our annual summer vacation. And Trent calls me up and he's just, he's like, "You want to do a debate with me? It's on whether Muslims worship the same God as Christians." And at that time, he didn't even tell me who the debate opponent was. Had I been told at that time that it was Jay Dyer, I probably would have said no,
Hmm.
knowing what I know about him. Um, at any rate, I said, yeah, sure, why not? Why not inject a little debate into my summer vacation?
I didn't
Uh,
realize you were actually like actively traveling at the time. I saw that you were later in what was it, St.
no,
Andrews.
if
So
you look closely at my background during the debate, I am in a hotel room in
wow.
northwestern England, the Lake
Wow.
District, for people who know their English geography at the time. And it's 1:30 a.m. and the debate went
Oh my.
until almost 4 a.m.
Oh my
my time.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I wasn't expecting it to be much or be a big
Yeah.
deal or get even a tenth of the amount of the attention that it actually got.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously we'll talk about what happened during the debate, but once I saw how that went, I expected there to be a little bit of discussion about the manner in which the debate was conducted, and maybe also the merits to some extent of the debate. And then, sure enough, it blew up on Twitter, and well, it's the most attention that it's the most number of notifications I've ever gotten in a week on
Yeah.
Twitter. That's for sure. And I've already gotten multiple invites to do follow-ups like this on the
Oh
debate.
really?
So that's
Wow.
been that's been the experience.
Well, well, I'm glad you came here first or among your first. 'Cause you owe it to me,
No,
Christopher. We've been
you're
friends,
the
so
you're the first, Eric. Yup.
yeah, good, awesome. So, all right, I had no idea about that background, so that's super interesting. Um, would you mind saying like what you said you wouldn't have done it if you knew it was Jay Dyer? Why is that? Because I just learned about this guy like a week ago. I think like a day or two before the debate, I had heard his name floating around. Maybe Googled him once, so I don't know anything about him. I don't really do a lot of online, like looking around at like people who are online. So is he a
Yeah,
Christian? I suppose he's a Christian now, having watched the debate myself. But
yeah.
what is
So
it that your impression of him? Not
I
to like
don't
drag anybody through the mud here. It's just like just to get like
right.
base impression. Like
No,
what
I
were your
mean
thoughts
I'm
going
just
in?
right. Anything I'm about to say is just my opinion on
Sure.
stuff that is all public information about Jay Dyer, appearances and things, statements and debates that I'm sure he proudly stands by.
Hmm.
Um, so, uh, right. I mean, I don't know much about his history. My understanding is he's jumped around a little bit from, you know, Protestant to Catholic to Orthodox. I'm not entirely sure about all the details of that, but that's not relevant to my objection to him. My biggest concern about him is that he just in multiple ways embodies the personality of a Orthodox radio shock jock. I mean, yeah, I mean, it comes across like the Eastern Orthodox version of I don't know. Who's the Rush Limbaugh? Yeah, that's the name I'm trying to remember. I have no idea what his credentials are in terms or educational background. And you know, obviously people always like to talk about like, oh well, what does it matter? Why are you trying to gatekeep based on credentials? And the answer to that question is frankly just like there's way too many people in the world for me to debate everybody or even read everybody's work or so forth and so on. So credentials are just actually are a very helpful heuristic device for narrowing down who I'm going to listen to, who I'm going to read, who I'm going to debate, and so forth. But at any rate, that's also not really neither here nor there with Jay Dyer, because I had come across, you know, multiple interactions on social media and YouTube that he's had with other people, and I think it's uncontroversial to say he has a reputation for showmanship would be the most charitable way of putting it. And also a reputation for, as I think the debate bared out, a reputation for not actually knowing at least the relevant philosophical background, which is often important in theology. I mean, it's a great illustration of the way in which the Catholic Church's prudence in forcing her seminarians to spend 4 years doing a bachelor's degree in philosophy before they can move on to theology is extremely wise, because you know and I find this a lot among Eastern Orthodox people, especially because there are notable exceptions. You and I have a good friend and fellow philosopher, Nathan, who is an excellent exception to this, and I'm sure there's many like him in the Eastern Orthodox Church. But the Eastern Orthodox have an unfortunate tendency toward fideism and to paying attention to revealed theology without any attention on the philosophical presuppositions of that revealed theology, let alone gathering the required expertise to speak intelligently as to those philosophical presuppositions.
Yeah.
And that's enormously important in a debate like this, where you're just not going to resolve the question of whether Muslims and Christians worship the same God based purely on the Bible and the Quran. You will not. It's just
true.
There's no way that's going to work. You have to do a lot of philosophy of language. You have to think about the logic of intentional contexts. You have to think about a little bit of metaphysics, not as much as I think people are first inclined to think you have to do, but a little bit of metaphysics and so on. And you have to know how to do these things well. And every kind of impression I've had, encounter I've had with Jay Dyer and his followers online has given me the impression that he's not competent in the philosophical presuppositions of the theological views he defends. And I mean, as an instructor, I have a lot of experience with people who don't know what they're talking about. I teach students all the time who don't know.
Right.
That's fine. I could deal with people who don't know what they're talking about. and I can also deal with people who are are a little full of themselves, and not
Yeah.
least of all because I see that man every time I look in the mirror, or someone who's a little too full of
Yeah.
himself. Um,
Yeah.
I'm happy to deal with either of those groups. What is a little bit hard is when you got someone who does not know what they're talking about, and
Yeah.
has all the arrogance of somebody who is who does know what they're talking about and knows that they know what they're talking about. Yeah.
Right. 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 Yeah. So it's funny you say that the gatekeeping stuff. I understand that too, because you don't want to be like, well, if you haven't had an education X, Y, and Z, and then everybody's education is different. I mean, then you're not allowed to have this conversation. But then again, you get certain tools once you have gone to a certain level of education. Like it's not just the stuff you've learned, but it's also the skills that you acquire along the way. And of course the literature and everything that you've been exposed to, and you realize, okay, what I first was taking just as an obvious thing, now I have to rethink this. Like it seems obvious. Like I asked my wife Chelsea this, I think a week ago when this debate was happening, and I was like, well, what do you think? Do you think Christians and Muslims worship the same God? And she was like, well, of course not. But then it's like, okay, but hold on, wait, I want to like maybe present this to you and then see what you think. And I just told her a little bit about referent and, a rigid designation and stuff. And then like gave her a little bit of that background. And she was like, maybe they do, like, so, but yeah. And then I think once you're up to a certain level of education and having taught a lot of people, like you were mentioning, you get a feel for, like how somebody can not perform, but like you can tell whether they know what they're talking about or not, And so like the average viewer in the comments who's like, oh, all they see, somebody who's like uninformed, they're going to see people raging and they're not going to follow the substance of the conversation. And so they're going to think like, with respect to that bait, they're going to be like, well, Trent was misbehaving, so he must be wrong in everything he said. And so I want to get into that, of course. So this is just all preliminary stuff for all those people who are watching, but I want to show you kind of, so this is what I have planned. So with your permission, Christopher, I want to turn to the actual video. So the idea here is like what I said to you in text, which is so funny. I don't see why people like put their text up on the screen and everything, but I'll just read it to you. So the idea here is like, first, like kind of, everybody knows that this debate went viral for certain reasons. I don't think it was because of the topic so much. I mean, that was super interesting, of course, but I think it was because people were misbehaving in the debate and it led to rage and clicks and so on. And it was like, look what this guy said and did, and he was misbehaving. So I want to get into that. And then I want to kind of comment as we go. And so this document here, I'll show this up on screen. This, and for anybody watching along, either, if you're watching the recorded version, you can always go back, but maybe you can just take a screenshot here of all the timestamps at like what I thought was a significant point in the debate. So we'll go through each one of these. The ones that are starred, we're really going to start upon. But I'm going to start down here at the triple star, 1 hour, 27 minutes. The first triple star one near the bottom is kind of like a teaser, and then we'll come back up here because I think the raging starts at that first starred one, the 33-minute mark.
Right.
That's the first raging, or the first, like, say, insults. But I want to see, I was thinking, like, people don't just start insulting one another. So that's what that 30-minute mark is. And so we'll go back there and see, like, okay, what was it, like, in the conversation that led up to why people started insulting each other? And so that's the idea. So we'll show the video now. Have it here. We'll key it up. I have it at this, like I said, this teaser video. So this, for anybody who hasn't watched the video, I know 2 hours is a long time, but go and watch it if you haven't already. And so this is where a lot of the confusion, I think, is exhibited. Like I say in that, let's show you again. Like I say in that timestamp thing, this is where Christopher, you asked a really important question. Hey, Jay, do Catholics and do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? He says no, but then this is about the worship. So anyway, let me just play it, and then we'll go from there. All right, so that I think it's pretty telling. That shows thoughts there, right there. That shows. Let me show this on. Sorry about that. Did I not put this on? Okay.
Derek, I didn't see it.
Okay, sorry. Let's go back. I had the wrong thing up, so let's go back here. So this was 27. My bad. I forgot to put the thing. All right, here we go.
That talk is possible.
So Jay, you disagree with us, right? You think that Muslims cannot worship, they do not worship the same God as Christians, correct?
If by worship we mean something that God accepts or that actually gets you to the object, no.
Okay, right. So if you're talking about what God accepts, then I just agree with you. I don't think that the worship of Muslims is acceptable to God.
Yeah,
I agree.
Agreed.
But the debate is about, that's why I said it's about the text of Vatican II, and the Vatican II contradicts.
No, it's not.
That's what I can debate.
Did you get a different invitation than I didn't? Christopher, did you get that invitation? I didn't get that invitation.
Cameron.
All right, so thoughts on that right there. This is just like a teaser of like where the debate went wrong, kind of people talking past each other.
Right. So obviously, if you saw the title of the debate, which was the same as the resolution of the debate, do Muslims and Christians worship the same God, then that clip should be a little confusing to you, because by that point, Jay was simply trying to dictate what the debate was supposed to be about, even though certainly I had agreed to a debate on the question of whether Muslims and Christians worship the same God. I had not heard anything from Jay or from Father Deacon Ananias about their intention or desire to talk about Vatican II or whether the Pope is an apostate, or whether Catholic dogma is consistent, and or any of that, or whether Muslims and whether the worship of Muslims is acceptable to God. Because look, if, as I hopefully made clear in that clip, if that were the debate resolution, and obviously
you would have come prepared for that, wouldn't you?
No, I wouldn't have come at all, because I would just say, I agree with Jay Dyer. The worship of Muslims is not acceptable to God. Now I don't know if Trent is on the same, I think Trent is on the same page as me with that, because I think in that clip, you saw him also agree. But you could certainly imagine a Catholic, who I think is grievously wrong, holding a position that in some way or another, Muslim worship is somehow acceptable to God, pleasing to God, whatever, for reasons that are going to take us way too deep into the dogmatics. I don't accept that view at all. And that's obviously a normative question about that is, do Muslims and Christians worship the same God? In my eyes, is not really a normative question at all, except maybe insofar as we talk about the slight way in which reference itself can be normative. But they wanted to get into a whole debate about the enormously complicated normative question about whether Muslim worship is acceptable to God, whether it's pleasing to God, and stuff like whether Catholic dogma is consistent, whether the Pope is an apostate. I mean, this is another thing that comes across to me about Jay Dyer is he Gish gallops, I think is the term people like to use for it.
Yeah. That's a technical term for it. Yeah.
Right. Not a particularly pleasing term to my ears or whatever. But he wants to talk about a dozen different things at once.
Right.
And this came through also in the subsequent Twitter debates about people who all wanted to talk about Vatican II the Pope and Catholics are inconsistent, blah, 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 blah. Those are all enormous debates unto themselves, each of which would take more than 2 hours to try to have a meaningful exchange on. Whole books have been written. Obviously, there's a lot of disagreements about Vatican II within the Catholic world before you even talk about Eastern Orthodox or Protestants, et cetera, et cetera. So I was definitely not there to talk about any of that. It was way too complicated for me to try to get into. And I mean, as you point out, I would have prepared differently. I would have probably just said no, because those questions were entirely too complicated for me to prepare for, to have a fruitful interaction with anybody, let alone Jay Dyer, on the kind of notice I had for the debate, which was only about a week. And given the circumstances, as I said, I was on vacation. I had to stay up until 1:30 a.m. to have this debate. I agreed to do this because it was a very simple, straightforward question that I thought was settled by a very simple, straightforward philosophical tools. Moreover, it's just, as I tried to make clear in the debate, it's just irrelevant. You could think that Vatican II, as I guess Catholic Sedevacantist do, was a complete apostate council. You could think that every pope since Pius XII is a heretic, and you could think that the Catholic faith is completely bankrupt, and everything the Eastern Orthodox every accusation the Eastern Orthodox have ever made against the Catholic faith is true. And yet, it could still be the case that Catholics and Muslims worship the same God, or generally
totally beside the point.
Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Yeah.
Turn to this next clip. So here, with respect to Gish Galloping, kind of missing the point of the. So if anybody is watching this doesn't know what Gish Gallop is, just go look it up. It started as a political term, but the idea is like you don't stay on task. You throw a bunch of different things at your opponent, so where they're kind of overwhelmed with the things that you're making, and in good faith the person is trying to like answer each thing, but they don't realize that it's just an impossible assault. You can't answer everything. And I think I don't know if the person doing the Gish Gallop realizes what they're doing, or if they're just, I don't know if they're really trying to unsettle their opponent, or they just think that that's how a debate is supposed to work.
I think some of it is, and this gets back to the importance of philosophy, I think some of it has to do with the fact that people who are not philosophically trained are not trained to distinguish questions and to see how questions sit in logical space, whether certain answers to question A, how they would be logically related to certain answers to question B, and so forth and so on. So, I mean, this is one of the benefits of philosophical training, is you learn how to distinguish questions and understand what is and is not relevant to the resolution of the question at hand.
Yeah. Let me show this one clip here, so we can. This is all really, I think here, Father Ananias, he demonstrates his own kind of annoyance with Jay, and I think this is telling here. So let's play this here.
Thank you, appreciate that. All right, I hand it over to you.
What about you, Chris?
Oh, so I guess it seems to me like everything, the progress we've made up to this point has led us to a point where I think Jay is insisting, look, there's something really special about the intentional attitudes of adoration and worship that's different from mere reference and different from the intentional attitude of loving. And I would just love either of our opponents here to explain what the...
First of all, I appreciate here, just a minute, and I'll keep playing it, that you're being really good faith. Like, you're like, even though Jay up to this point, even though Trent up to this point have kind of like tried to derail the substance of the debate, like, it's like, okay, let's keep going. I mean, what else are you going to do? Just turn it into like a melee? But yeah, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the attempt at a good faith response, but it kind of breaks down from there.
What the relevant difference is supposed to be between those intentional attitudes picked out by the verbs used in Vatican II or elsewhere, and more mundane examples of intentional attitudes like loving, Lois Lane loves Clark Kent.
And she can adore him and worship him too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like it's actually very obvious that even if for some bizarre, idolatrous reason, Lois Lane began to worship and adore Clark Kent, that she would nevertheless succeed in doing so, even though she explicitly rejects important claims about Clark Kent, namely that he can fly, namely that he's a Kryptonian, which is essential to him, by the way, right? So even if you deny things that are essential to somebody, you can still succeed in having these intentional attitudes like worship and adoration toward that object.
Well, the worst.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Jay, can you turn up your mic? Unless you didn't change anything. Just
turn it down.
Okay. Keep talking.
Jay, can you shout really loud so I can hear you?
Just start shouting.
Just start screaming.
Oh, he'll get there. He'll get there.
All right. I'm sorry for my jokes.
Can we put this page up?
Yeah, one sec.
And then hold on.
So the Pharisees, at this time, I know you guys hate scripture, but the Pharisees at this time,
for those who didn't hear, he said, "I know you guys hate scripture."
Had a Unitarian
That's a
view.
punk shot.
Why don't you shut up, man?
People without
Every time I try to
people
talk,
without good ideas take punk shots
dude.
like
You're
that.
just a fucking clown, man.
That's a
You're
punk
clown,
move.
dude.
Low
You won't
class.
let me make the
Low
argument.
class.
You won't make.
All right. Thoughts on that exchange there?
Yeah, so I guess this might just start getting into the how the debate went between Trent and Jay generally.
Yep. And we're fine to go there. That's what people want to hear about. So let's go there now.
Right. Yeah. So just to back up a little bit, I mean, at that point in the debate, you called it good faith. I guess for me, it was really just out of frustration that we weren't getting anywhere in even discovering what the fundamental disagreement was about the question at hand. Because, Jay was just, as I said, trying to go on about whether the Pope is an apostate and whether Catholicism is contradictory and so forth and so on. And Trent, was responding on Jay's level. And I think there's a place for that.
What did you think about that at the time? I know it's like a little bit amusing, but like for the purpose of like, what was your reaction at the time? Like, did you think that was helpful to the debate? Were you giving a guy its own medicine, which is also what I saw online? What was your thoughts during the time?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what Trent intended to do, was to give Jay his own medicine. And I think that did work to some degree. Obviously, it required Trent to, make a certain kind of impression with the audience that the audience very, very much received. As Trent, we'll get to the eating, I guess, in just a moment. But unfortunately, Jay puts his opponents in this kind of impossible situation where you either allow them to Gish gallop and then come away from the debate saying, "Oh, Jay Dyer made 15 points and they all went completely most of them went completely unanswered," as they obviously would,
because they're irrelevant
opponents. Yeah, and maybe you have I don't know if you have this clip lined up, but after the debate, Jay, really took to Twitter to mock me for a point in the debate where I just said, "I'm not going to answer that question."
Right.
And he mocked me as if, I refused to answer the question out of fear, but I refused to answer the question out of a desire to prevent him from Gish galloping. Right. Like, I'm not going to, as soon as I start answering the question, he's getting what he wants. He's getting the ability to make the debate about Vatican II and whether Catholic dogma is inconsistent and so forth and so on, and all these minutiae of scripture that ultimately don't make a difference to the debate resolution. So the only way to really stop him, which I think, say whatever else you want to say, I guess, about how polite Trent was or whatever, but Trent and I succeeded in shutting him down to the point where he basically just agreed that we were not going to have the debate that he wanted to have. And therefore he had nothing further to say.
Yeah. So I remember, Trent was both of our former professor, and we had a pro seminar the first year, the writing seminar, and I don't know if you remember this, but he used to talk about like the lizard brain. Do you remember this? Like the idea that like sometimes you need to like, it's super weird because it's the first time I'd ever heard of it, but it's a colloquial kind of informal term meaning like the cerebellum, the brainstem, like whatever, like this is the part of the brain that only concerns itself with like survival and the bodily, like basic bodily functions.
Right. Sure.
So it's just a colloquial term to be like, sometimes you need to address that rather than the higher order thinking. And he was going on about this. And so I could see this play out because like knowing Trent and knowing that he thinks a certain way, I realized that if you can't, like from Trent's perspective, and yes, we'll get into like what he did wrong and so on if you like. But he realized he wasn't going to get that conversation at this higher order level. And so he decided, okay, let's just play this game of I'm just going to address this. And that's why I think he got into like the, do you have any experience with boxing? Do you want to fight about this? Because I think he realized, this guy doesn't want to have this conversation. It's almost like a pretend, like let's try to have this conversation, but then he's going to gish gallop you. He's going to throw all these things at you. I could see very clearly that Trent's now going to lower himself and respond to that. Now, whether that was a good thing to do,
Yeah, I mean, so
probably not, but it was effective in the idea of like, you're right. It shut him down to the point where now he's going to sit there quietly and listen to what Father Ananias had to say, because he was being shut down the entire time, which was disrespectful to him. Nobody else could talk. I mean, everybody was being talked over. So anyway, your thoughts on that?
So to come back to what I had said earlier, had I known it was Jay Dyer, I probably would have just said no. And the reason is that the way that Jay Dyer proceeds puts his opponents to this Sophie's choice of either I have to behave like Trent to shut this guy down, or I try to engage with him fruitfully, but then it just looks like I lost because he flashed 15 slides with text that nobody can even see because it's microscopic and on the screen for half a second with long quotations, unsourced. I have no idea where this stuff came from. None of it was provided in advance. And then I'm supposed to spend the next 2 hours sitting there looking like an idiot trying to respond to every historical and dogmatic point one by one in a way that's going to take me 10 times at least as long to deal with each point as it took Jay Dyer to raise it.
You could do if you wanted to.
Right. Well, not in that debate context, because obviously,
you'd have to write a book or something.
Equal time, right? Which you that's why Gish Galloping works, right? Gish Galloping works because you get equal time, but when it takes far, far, far more than equal time to deal with accusations than it takes to make accusations, right?
Yeah.
And so now I think maybe there probably is a balance to be struck that I was trying myself to strike between not allowing him to do that, but also not being as not being quite as irreverent as I think Trent was being. I think people who watch the debate will notice there were points where I was just dismissing, vigorously dismissing what Jay said out of hand, because I could just see that it's going to go down a Gish Galloping rabbit hole, or because he was just blatantly misrepresenting what Trent or I had already said. I can't remember if this happened in the debate itself or afterward. Like at one point, very early in the debate, Trent and I were making the point that it could have been the case that at one point early Muslims or even later Muslims were simultaneously worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and demons.
Right.
And later on, I think it was in the debate, Jay made the accusation that we think that you can worship demons as God.
Yeah.
Which is, right. This comes again to
totally different.
Philosophical precision is enormously important here.
Yeah. So let me speak to that, and then we'll queue up, because I do have it queued up, the point where he calls you out for not answering his question. How dare you? But yeah, so you had made the point with respect to, okay, if Muslims worship God, they could also worship demons. Like, that is mutually consistent. That's not inconsistent whatsoever. And then Jay took that to mean that when you worship God, you are also worshiping a demon. Is that being your claim, which is totally incoherent?
Not just that the worship would be simultaneous, that when you're worshiping God, you're also worshiping a demon. As I recall, the claim was that we thought you could worship a demon as God, right? Right. And that was never the claim. The claim was that they could be worshipped side by side by the same people, in some kind of version of henotheism, right? Which was not uncommon in the ancient world where Islam was emerging from a pagan background. Yeah.
Well, let's cue this up. We've got pull back over here. All right, so this clip goes for about 2.5 minutes. So, all right, let's see what we got here.
Even though he says, I explicitly reject, hate, and oppose your triadic deity, he is a demon. He still worships the Trinity.
The same way that Lois Lane can refer to and love.
Worship and adore is not the same thing as a referent, dude. Worship and adore.
Let me finish. So the same way that Lois Lane can refer to and love is very much like worship and adore, right? Clark Kent, even though she explicitly rejects that Clark Kent can fly. Now, you tell me what's supposed to be the relevant difference between...
To the Unitarian Pharisees, when he's debating with them, you do not have the love of God and you do not have the Father.
What relevance is that? Of what relevance is that? I'm not answering that question. What relevance it has.
You won't have
that right there, and you'll see Trent's reaction to it. It's completely out of line within a debate. Like, I don't know why you would want to laugh, but anyway, sorry to interject.
Well, I mean, just to clarify very quickly, I think, and I tried to make this point, but I got spoken over, which was there's a difference between loving God and having the love of God, which is, in my interpretation of the relevant scriptural passage, at least, a claim about having supernatural charity, which is not the same as just loving God generically, which is something Aristotle could do, natural theologians can do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. Okay, let's back this up a little bit, and then.
And you do not have the Father.
What relevance is that? Of what relevance is that? I'm not answering that question. What relevance it has.
You won't answer the question because it refutes the very thing that you just argued.
No, because
look at this guy. Look at this demon back here. It's a Unitarian position that's equivalent to Islam. It's the Pharisees who say we have the Father, and Jesus says you do not have the Father, nor do you have the love of God in you. It's in my slides.
And you can refer to and worship
my God,
the true God.
You said they have the love of God. Jesus says you do not have the love of God explicitly.
No, I didn't say that.
Yes, you did. You said that. You said that we can still love God. You said love. Yes, you did. Love and adore.
All right. Oh, right here. Hold on. This is right here. Hold on.
You did. You said that. You said that we can still love God. You said
did you catch this? He makes fun of your face, Christopher.
Yes, you did. Love and adore.
I said he can still love. God.
I didn't say.
Yeah, that went unseen. But yeah,
I didn't notice that in a moment, and I don't necessarily think maybe he's making fun of my face. I have no idea, but I thought that seems to me like he's just making the generic like I like your you have nothing to say
model. So thoughts on that, man? Anyway,
yeah. So, well, as I said, right, what was actually the reason I wanted to push him on the relevance there is, I mean, I knew the point he was trying to make. But the reason I was pushing him on the relevance is because the verse to which he's referring about not having the love of the Father is a claim about the relevant Jews not having supernatural charity, not about them not being able to have any kind of intentional attitudes toward the Father. Right?
Yeah.
It's like very different claims. And you know,
Can I ask you, what do you mean by supernatural charity? Are you talking about Thomas Aquinas's infused theological virtue of charity?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So just having the virtue of charity, or as we'd also as Catholics would also put it, that this is equivalent to having habitual or sanctifying grace, right? So what Christ is saying about the Jews in that verse is that they do not have supernatural charity. They do not have habitual or sanctifying grace within their souls. In other words, they don't, which is to say, they do not love the Father in the way that they ought. Right? They do not have the love of the Father, the kind that would actually justify them.
And this is what you meant by especially a parallel here with worship. You can, you say you don't find the pull of the intuition here, but one could argue that you could worship God in like unfitting ways or unacceptable ways to God, or maybe you find some partially acceptable but not fully acceptable. So you're saying here, parallel, sure, you could love God but not in the most appropriate and fitting way that God deserves.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Or even, right, as I think the point Christ is trying to make there, you could fail to love God in even the most minimally acceptable way, the way that would be required for justification and to be admitted into paradise, right? You could fail to be in grace, in sanctifying grace in this kind of way. That's quite different, obviously, from saying that the relevant Jews do not worship God at all, that they do not love God at all, that they cannot have any kind of intentional attitudes to God at all.
That's one you're describing now is a much more radical claim.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted, I guess in a certain way, I was engaged in this bit of Socratic questioning there. I knew what conflation Jay was making, the conflation between having the love of the Father, sanctifying grace within one's soul, and having any kind of intentional attitudes toward the Father or other divine persons at all. But I wanted him to discover that for himself by pushing him on, okay, what's the relevance? Yeah. And this gets back to, again,
that
once
backfired
again,
on you.
I don't think that this point can really be overemphasized, especially given what I saw on Twitter after the debate. The importance.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we get more into that in just a bit, but specifically now, just I'm talking about the importance of philosophical training with respect to being able to articulate precisely how some kind of text that you're reading from, in this case, Scripture, Jay is trying to use Scripture, how that is relevant to the question at hand, right? And what Jay was doing was extremely superficial. It's like, well, look, it says love and Father here in the text, and they don't have it. And isn't that enough to show that you're wrong?
Yeah.
No, you obviously have to engage in some kind of interpretation of this.
And then when you try to explain and be like, oh, hold on, it looks like you're backpedaling to somebody who's untrained. It looks like, well, they don't know what they're talking about, so they're obviously, or they're trying to rationalize and have this really weird, acrobatic, justification, when all you're doing is like trying to answer the Gish scallop, right?
Right. Yeah. Or just trying to get him. I mean, what happened later in the debate was, Jay threw up his hands, conceded the debate.
He did. Yeah.
Started trying to go after Cameron about what they had discussed before.
That's right.
As if any of that would be relevant, because I was never told by Cameron or by Trent. I never talked before the debate to Jay or to Father Deacon Ananias. My only points of communication were with Cameron and with Trent.
Yeah.
And at no point was there any discussion of, well, we're going to get into whether Vatican II was a legitimate council, whether Catholic dogma is consistent, whether the Pope is an apostate. That was never.
I think it's pronounced apostate, Christopher.
Yeah. No, just wrong. That's just wrong.
He pointed that out during a debate. That's not something you do in a debate. But anyway.
Number one, apostate is a perfectly reasonable and acceptable pronunciation of that word. Number two, for some reason, and this could have just been that he didn't. There was some kind of issue with the audio. He thought I was trying to say apostasy, and this is probably this is one of the points, I guess, where I got the most annoyed with him, and just said, "Yeah, no, dude, it's a different noun. You can go look it up."
Yeah.
It's actually apostate, not apostasy.
Yeah.
Those are two distinct nouns at any rate. Coming back to my earlier point,
Go ahead.
Very quickly. I had no issue with him using documents, dogmatic documents.
You said that in the debate.
All.
Yep.
No problem with that. That was fine. If he wanted to use those to talk about whether Muslims and Christians worship the same God.
Right.
You can make an argument from authority. Those are the weakest kinds of arguments, but it's an argument. And that would have been fine, but he wasn't using the documents in that way. He was using the documents to try to illustrate that, as I said, that Vatican II had contradicted earlier Catholic dogma, that the Pope, Benedict, you could just see this from the images he put up on the screen of Benedict with some Muslim imam, and so forth, as if that's remotely relevant. He wanted to talk about whether, Benedict and Francis and so forth are really Christian or and so forth and so on. And obviously, what Father Deacon Ananias was trying to say and do was a worlds away from anything Jay Dyer was saying and doing.
Absolutely.
But you did actually see, if you paid close attention to what Jay was trying to do early in the debate and the discussion at the very end of the debate that I had with Father Deacon Ananias, you did see that they were fundamentally coming from the same theoretical point of view, which is one on which the people who get to worship the true God on their view is, not even all Eastern Orthodox people. It's like at a bare minimum, a necessary condition that Father Deacon Ananias thought was required to worship the true God is that you share what he takes to be the Eastern Orthodox theology of the Eucharist, and a huge emphasis there on what he takes to be, because of course I would be shocked if in fact all Eastern Orthodox are on the same page about the Eucharist. So
it's not a sufficient condition to be Orthodox in order to worship the true God, but is it a necessary condition, does he think?
Yeah. I mean, later on Twitter, I mean, he basically embraced the claim that all heresy involves idolatry. So any heresy, presumably it has to be formal heresy, I guess, not merely material, but any heresy means you don't worship the one true God. And that to me is an absurdly narrow,
that is very strange,
of who worships the one true God, especially when you look at what the debates about heretics in apostolic Christianity looked like. we did not accuse garden variety heretics. Some heresies could, of course, involve idolatry. That's certainly possible. But apostolic Christianity, all the way up to and beyond the Protestant schism in the 16th century, never took garden variety heretics to be guilty ipso facto of idolatry. So even from a purely theological perspective, there is just no grounding in the tradition for the proposition that all heresy involves some kind of idolatry. But that seemed to be the ultimate premise, unspoken, tacit premise from which both Jay Dyer and Father Deacon Ananias were operating in the debate.
What significance do you think that has? Can you spell that out? Like the idea that,
well,
why is it not the case that all heresy is a form of idolatry?
Yeah, good. So actually, I just before I jumped on this debate with you, I was seeing that Trent Horn, so not Trent Dougherty, Trent Horn, the famous Catholic apologist, dipped his toes into this debate as well.
Yeah.
And he was trying to stake out. Did you see this?
I saw a clip of it. Yeah.
Okay. He was trying to
he preferred the answer that it's neither, and that there's some confusion, or to ask the question would be to muddle the waters, and it was an unsatisfying answer, I think. And Trent Horn is usually really, really great on many stuff.
But the clip, importantly, the clip that I saw involved him clarifying, like he doesn't like the claim that Christians and Muslims worship the same God.
He doesn't like it.
That makes it sound as if we worship. We have conceptions of God that are identical in every respect. Yeah, and okay, right. I mean, if that's really what you thought, and I think maybe a lot of the Eastern Orthodox followers of the debate had something like this kind of an impression as well. That in order for Christians and Muslims to worship the same God, our conceptions of God have to be the same in all respects. Okay. I mean, if that were actually the necessary condition of worshiping the same God, then I would agree Christians and Muslims do not worship the same God. In fact, on that conception, very few people worship the same God, because then you're going to need, I mean, there's not even complete agreement within the bounds of Catholic orthodoxy about every single aspect of the conception of God, right?
Right.
I mean, I hold to a very strong Thomistic version of divine simplicity. I know other Catholics who are perfectly orthodox, good Catholics who hold a more Scotist view of divine simplicity. Our conceptions of God are not completely identical. And so if that's really the necessary condition, then what you're saying is Thomists and Scotists don't even worship the same God. Yeah. And that to me is a reductio, right? I mean, if you
right.
If you reach that conclusion, then something's gone dramatically wrong. And and this is what I spent most of my opening in the debate trying to show.
Yes, I really appreciated that, because all you had to do is just be like, I already talked about this. This is not required. This is not what I'm saying. This is not what I'm saying. Because they, especially Jay, like bit at this, and you're like, I already addressed this. So
yeah. So the thing that has gone wrong is that is just not how reference and other intentional attitudes work. And nobody thinks that's how they work in outside of theological context, right? And this is kind of like this is going to be like a common phenomenon within theology, right? So a lot of people who have perfectly good intentions, who want to make God as sacred as possible, right, are going to be to hold God in the highest esteem, which are perfectly good desires, right, are going to want to say, well, God's not like all this created riffraff. Maybe I could make mistakes about how, the kind of properties Superman has, or the kind of properties water has, and still succeed in referring
Yeah.
to Superman or water. But it's different when it comes to God, right? Like I like that instinct. That's a perfectly good instinct, right? Many things are different when it comes to God.
Right.
But the thing about reference and intentional attitudes is that when you're talking about what God do I worship, or what God do I love or adore or refer to, that's really, and this is where kind of important metaphysics comes into play, as well as the philosophy of language, which is looming over this whole debate. That's really a question more about me than it is about God, right?
That's exactly what I was thinking. It gives the subject, the speaker, a lot of power over what's happening.
Right, yeah,
it might be unnecessary. It's almost like a subjective or relativism kind of in play here, like a religious relativism. Like what I conceive of God is going to be the thing that like is operative here.
Yeah, and look, as I said, that's a good instinct. Like I don't want to say God is anything like creatures, but the thing is, that's not what you're saying when you say that the conditions for reference to God or holding other intentional attitudes toward God are the same as in the creaturely case, because when you're talking about whether I refer to God or I worship God or I adore God and so forth, you're not talking. That's not a question about God per se. That's a question about me and whether I am succeeding on latching onto this extra mental reality in the right kind of way. Maybe some of this sounds magical to people who are not well versed in the philosophy of language and philosophy of mind literature, and it should, because when you talk to people who work in this area and philosophers more generally, what you find is that pretty much everybody in this literature agrees that reference is this really magical kind of thing. It's very mysterious how we can latch on to worlds, latch on to things in extramental reality using just our sounds, our bodily sounds, and things going on in our heads and so forth and so on. And of course, in my opinion, there's a very good argument to be made here that what's going on there is too magical to be explained by any kind of materialist worldview. And that's part of why we should reject materialism. But pretty much everybody, no matter what their theory of reference or intentional attitudes is, agrees that they're very mysterious. They're very kind of magical in their ability, in their extremely the extreme ease with which we can latch on to extramental realities using ideas and words and other symbols and so forth. So everybody, if you're just discovering this for the first time, it may seem like, no, it can't really be that easy. And it is that easy. And everybody basically agrees it's that easy. The trouble is to give a good theoretical explanation of how it could possibly be that easy, and one which doesn't embrace the equally absurd conclusion that you can succeed in referring to or holding intentional attitudes about a subject, even if you get everything wrong about them. Because one thing pretty much everybody else also agrees about is, and I took heat from the Mormons about this on Twitter after the debate as well.
Because you denied that Mormons, a God of Mormonism would be the God of Christianity.
In the debate, I didn't deny it, but I said I don't affirm it.
Okay.
At any rate,
because I would affirm that, but based on like a causal reference theory as well. So
it'll depend on what your theory of reference is. But
same with Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
I think what everybody, no matter what your theory of reference is, even if you're a causal theorist, I mean, I don't know, you could tell me what your view is, Derek. I mean, it seems like there's got to be a point where you just get too much wrong and the reference breaks down.
That seems right to me. Yeah.
I
haven't looked.
So, I mean,
so
it's a question then about like where you're going to draw that line. And I think, in my view, once you start saying things like, God used to be a man just like us,
Right.
in his divine nature, right?
You're
It's not
imagining something wildly different
about the incarnation and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Then I mean, transcendence seems to be really important for me. Like once you say, God's just another being among beings, and do so in the profound way that I think Mormons do, where you're saying no. Not only is he a being among other beings, in fact, he used to be of the same metaphysical species as you and I. Then it's I think in my opinion, it seems like things have just gone too far. As I said, I took a significant amount of heat from Mormons afterward on Twitter about this, including from one Mormon who I think is a graduate student in philosophy who very unreasonably accused me of not knowing what rigid designation is, even though my view of
don't you love that?
Is identical to Kripke's. I think along with Kripke that a rigid designator is a term which designates the same object in every possible world in which it exists and nothing else. I ended up catching some heat from the Mormons about not holding a sufficiently liberal view of reference. So as I said, it's very difficult to please everybody.
All right, so do you mind switching gears here? So I got a couple more clips. I think people will be interested in getting that if you're okay with it. We'll go back to the apostate pronunciation, but it also is a nice segue into our, I think, first or second money flash. I think it's our first money flash, and then we can talk about that. Segue nicely into that. So I've got this queued up, and this will run for about a minute and a half.
It does not matter whether Vatican II says
your magisterium matters.
It doesn't matter.
Jay, let's let him finish his point real quick.
It doesn't matter whether Vatican II says that there maybe is something salvific in Islam. It doesn't matter if all our popes are apostates. Right, it doesn't matter whether all our popes are heretics.
Thanks for admitting
all that matters. All that matters is that Christians and Muslims refer to and succeed in worshiping the one true God.
I don't grant that they succeed in that, and you haven't demonstrated that.
Well, can we just at least agree to talk about that and not whether the Pope is an apostate? I mean, it's just not relevant.
You mean the word apostasy, which you can't say?
I'm not saying apostasy, I'm saying apostate. Do you understand? It's a noun, apostate. You can pronounce it that way as well, sure.
Okay.
But it's a different noun. Right. It's not spelled the same way.
Qualifier for your magisterium right there. In the Middle Ages,
Father Ananias, you have something to say?
Yeah. In the Middle Ages,
I'd like to hear from Father Ananias.
Did you worship in a mosque in the Middle Ages?
So, Trent, Christopher, I know it was a lot. I had to speak really fast. I thought it was fast enough to even get through what I thought I timed at 5 minutes, and I didn't. So
let's hear the end. I'd like to hear the end of yours. Yeah, I'm happy to sit and listen to the end of yours.
Well, I want to go back to the kind of further point. I agree with you on the theories of reference and stuff, and use the Superman. That's a great one. Of how we could be seriously mistaken and how reference is established despite these kind of wrong predicates. But that's why I was making the argument that ignores yes, there we go. That ignores the special semantic and logical.
All right. So for those who didn't hear, I got it sped up a tiny bit. He says, "Is that your sex scandal money there?" Trent flashing the dollar bills. All right. Thoughts on that, Christopher? Let's get into the behavior of the participants here at this point. And we haven't really talked about Trent all that much, but that's been a real focus of critics online. So you said a little bit about this, but we said earlier about the lizard brain attacking somebody. Do you think that it was justifiable what Trent did? Would you do something like that? Do you think it was a good look for him as a Catholic, as representative of Catholicism? What are your thoughts here, man? Because this is what people want to hear.
Okay, yeah. So no, I definitely don't endorse everything that Trent did. I want to immediately qualify that though with what I had said earlier, namely that Trent was put into an impossible situation of either getting Gish galloped or having to be quite aggressive with Jay. Now, there are good, relevant ways of being aggressive and then there's like flashing your hundreds on the screen. So yeah, I definitely don't endorse any of that, as amusing as and entertaining as it may have been.
It is. This is why I think the debate. Sorry to interrupt here and interject, but this is why it got all the attention that it did. I mean, it's highly entertaining.
Right. Yeah.
And then once you get to like Father Ananias speaking again, it's like I even found myself like I do philosophy for a living, got a doctorate and everything, and I'm like snoozing because there's no action. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, man, there's no action anymore.
This is just one of the, I think, inherent risks of doing online interactions in general, especially with people, especially on channels that are as large as Capturing Christianity, where, it's not a side gig. People's livelihoods are on the line, right? I mean, and this is absolutely nothing against Cameron. I don't begrudge him or anybody else who's trying to make a living off of YouTube, but the problem that injects into having debates and discussions like this is that decisions are being guided now not by what's most intellectually stimulating or interesting or fruitful, but rather by what's going to get the most views, right? And so, if you're right, I mean, if you're talking about putting technical philosophy of language up against, verbal cage matches are going to win every time in terms of level of entertainment. And
not to say that Cameron orchestrated it this way or anything. It just happened to be this way.
Yeah, no, right. Of course not. Again, nothing I'm saying is any dig against Cameron or anybody else who is trying to make a living off of YouTube. It's just, it comes with this inherent risk of allowing the kind of fireworks that were going on between Jay and Trent to dominate the debate, because people will watch that, right? I mean, and if I the reason this is not at all a dig against Cameron is that if my ability to support my family came down to how many clicks people were giving to how many views I was getting on YouTube, I would probably do similar things, right? Whether for better or worse, I would probably do similar things because this now is a matter not just of a hobby I have on the side where I'm trying to have intellectual engagements with professional philosophers and theologians. It's now a livelihood, and that's obviously going to change the way that I make decisions about who to have on the channel, first of all, right? I mean, Jay Dyer doesn't really belong in academic discussions, period. So when you're seeing Jay Dyer on some kind of YouTube channel, it's, I mean, the probability that he's there in order to generate clicks and therefore revenue is pretty high, in my view, right? So I'm sure there are true believers out there, Eastern Orthodox true believers who really think Jay is an oracle, but when he's being brought onto channels, a lot of channels, I think that's obviously to drive revenue and so forth. Right. Trent obviously was giving some of the audience what they desired there as well. Because to be perfectly honest, the kind of audience, and this is part of why folks like my own doctoral advisor, Alex Pruse, do not do YouTube interviews, generally speaking. Do not do online engagements, and certainly don't do them live to whatever extent they may do them.
Certainly don't do them with somebody who's not in academia.
Right, and certainly don't do it with Jay Dyer. Maybe someone who's not in academia but has a well-established reputation as someone who's
Sure.
intellectually serious and so forth, but definitely, yeah. Right. So, yeah, I'm not, definitely not endorsing everything Trent did. He was put in a difficult position. He obviously went overboard with some of it, but at the same time, just to address your question about representation of Catholicism.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't take myself or Trent to be there. Obviously, I know it got billed as like Catholic versus Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
But nothing about the debate rested on which side was Catholic and which side was Eastern Orthodox.
That's exactly how it was framed, though, and everything that followed. Yeah.
I understand. But I wasn't seeing myself or Trent there as representatives of the Catholic faith. Because we weren't arguing anything that was distinctive to the Catholic faith. We were arguing a purely philosophical view about whether Christians and Muslims worship the same God, a view that you could hold whether you're Catholic or whether you're not, and a view which you could deny whether you're Catholic or whether you're not. Because we didn't get into this in the debate because I didn't want to feed Jay's appetite to get into Vatican II. But I don't think that the relevant line from Vatican II concerning whether where it says that Muslims worship and adore the one true God with us bears the relevant magisterial authority that you see other propositions in that document do bear, for the simple reason that I don't think that the God which is worshipped by Muslims is an object of magisterial authority. It doesn't bear on the faith or on it doesn't bear on faith and morals, right? It's a purely historical question about it's a purely historical / philosophical question about who do these non-Christians worship? Is it in fact the same God as us or not? So I read the relevant portion of Vatican II as just establishing a historical background for other claims that the fathers of Vatican II wanted to make. I don't think that the relevant proposition is magisterial. Of course, the magisterium's welcome to correct me about that. Key qualification: online left cats are not welcome to try to correct me about that. The magisterium is welcome to try to correct me about that. I don't want to hear from Mike Lewis or any of his crew about it. So on my view, at least, you could also be a Catholic and say that Christians and Muslims do not worship the same God.
Yeah, of course. It has no bearing on salvation.
I think you'd be wrong,
right?
But I don't think you'd be a bad Catholic or hold a heterodox view or anything like that. And likewise, you could be Eastern Orthodox and think that Christians and Muslims do worship the same God. So whether you're whether you're Catholic or Eastern Orthodox is just logically orthogonal to your view about this question. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's helpful. Okay. Well, I've got one more clip queued up here. And this is the one where, so Trent, I counted, he flashes money a total of 3 times. And it's important to note like why he does this. It's because he was offering Jay to give an argument. And if Jay could give an argument, then he would give him $100. Then he doubled it to $200. I can understand the frustration, but the method. At one point. Yeah, it was up to 1,000 at one point. Yeah. So then the money thing didn't work. And then at this point, this is where the part of the debate where Jay has, as you said earlier in this video, you said that Jay had already acknowledged more or less like the resolution was, yes, they can worship the same God, or at least they can refer to the same God. Like he admitted that. And then he wanted to change the whole debate to then being about Vatican II documents. So at this point, leading up to this point, he's silent for about 4 minutes or so. He's not saying really anything, but he's still interrupting, which is pretty astounding behavior. But I'll let just play out. This goes for only about a minute and a half. So And then we've got the boxing. Why is he offering to fight somebody? So here we go.
Thought like, well, that's a plausible, at least that's possible, right? That we could be both talking and not talking about.
And first of all, let me pause it here. I found it incredibly rude that he's doing this when his debate partner is just talking, who hasn't been able to talk the entire time, but he still wants to kind of be the center of attention. But yeah.
And just to be clear, I guess for people who maybe didn't watch the debate, didn't catch this is just a text exchange where Jay has asked Cameron, did Dr. Trent agree to also discussing previous dogmatic teaching on Muslims? And Cameron replied, I'm sure he'll be open to it, but I'm still waiting on those counsels so I can send them to him. So, right, this is all just about, are we going to be open to discussing previous, presumably Catholic, dogmatic teaching on Muslims? And again, just to clarify here, yes, we were always open to that, but he didn't want to use those documents to establish some kind of argument from authority that, in fact, they do worship the same, they do not worship the same God. He was trying to use it to establish that the Catholic faith is contradictory, that the recent popes have been apostates and so forth and so on, which is just irrelevant. Yeah.
Very far afield, but you would be willing to discuss them insofar as they had logical bearing on the resolution of the debate in question. Did he send those counsels ahead? Because he says it sounds he was waiting on them.
I never got, and my understanding from Cameron and Trent is they never got anything in advance from Jay or Father Deacon Ananias. I think, Cameron made this point in a subsequent video himself, and I agree with it, namely that it's perfectly reasonable to keep your arguments secret prior to a debate. If you want to launch some kind of argument, that's perfectly reasonable. But you shouldn't be keeping your sources secret if you intend to rely upon them as authorities. Because obviously nobody can check the authenticity of quotations, especially as they fly by the screen for half a second in microscopic text. Nobody could check whether that's authentic in real time, as you also simultaneously expect them to respond to it as if it is authentic. Right? Like, so.
And did it turn out that one of them wasn't authentic? That it wasn't a genuine text? Is that?
I didn't check up on this myself, but my understanding from Twitter interactions is that, in fact,
I think Cameron even shared something.
The document, one of the documents that he shared, calling where he said this is a base race. The relevant pope had said, whose name I don't even.
I remember that one. Yeah,
Innocent the Seventh. I can't remember. Who called one of the Crusades? Said of Muslims, it would be a shame if this base race, which worships demons, were to have authority over Christians, something to that effect.
Yeah.
Which is how we got into the whole "can you worship demons and God at the same time" debate. But apparently, that text, there's no contemporaneous source for Innocent the Seventh. If it's Innocent the Seventh, I don't.
That was Pope Urban II in 10. It was Pope Urban II in 1095, Council of Clermont.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Council of Clermont. Sorry. Thank you. There's no. What I understood from Cameron is there's in fact no contemporaneous report of Urban II having said that. That the earliest report of him having said that is 5 years later, and so forth. And regardless of that history question, it really doesn't matter, because a call to crusades is not a magisterial doc. I mean, like when you when you make a call to a crusade, that's not an attempt to teach the church on faith and morals. That's just a call to a crusade, right?
I think a lot of people, historically speaking, I think a lot of people who are living now and looking back on it, they don't think like a historian. They don't realize that the Catholic Church was not the same form of the Catholic Church it is now. It had extremely powerful political power. You know what I mean? Like very far reaching. Like the whole Roman Empire, it was like an emperor, crowned by the Pope. And so, I mean, of course they're going to make political decisions about war and crusades that aren't going to be made today. And then it's just unfair and it's unrealistic to criticize them according to today's standards and say, well, the Catholic Church did that. How dare they? This is with crusades in general, I think, as well.
Well, yeah, and whatever you think about that, my point is just there's obviously an enormous difference between the Pope undertaking a magisterial act by which he intends, as the pastor of all Christians, to resolve some question of faith and morals, and him operating in a quasi-political capacity to motivate Christians to undertake some kind of crusade or anything else against an enemy of the church or an enemy of Europe, as the case may be.
This was the relevant quotation, by the way.
Yeah, right. And notice the source there, right, is a source book for medieval history, right? I mean,
which is fair.
And that's right. That's fine as, I guess, a claim about Urban II said this. But even though there seems to be some doubt about even that. But my point is just, this is not this is not coming from a source book of dogmatic theology, right? This is not coming from a source book of magisterial statements made by popes on who worships whom and so forth. And of course, when you're talking about all of this, the question again has to be raised as to whether any pope even could define this kind of a thing, because on my view, I'd have to first be convinced that the question of what God the Muslims worship is in fact a question related to the Catholic faith or morals. And I am not convinced of that at all. And it certainly can't be a dogma. It's, even if you think it can somehow be authentic magisterial doctrine, it certainly can't be a dogma, because a dogma has to be immediately revealed by God. And obviously public revelation ended with the death of St. John hundreds of years before Islam existed. So there can be no divine revelation concerning which God the Muslims worship.
Yeah. Okay, let's play this clip forward. Let's see where we get.
At least that's possible, right? That we could be both talking and not talking about, if we make the right sort of kind of distinction about that. So no, I don't think it fits exactly into something like the present King of France is bald.
Well, because I am interested in semantic theories, because I do think that it's a good research, even though I'm probably not going to change my mind, but I do think there's a difference between what I'm tempted to believe and what I think is a reasonable.
I'm amazed you guys are still trying to have a conversation despite this happening.
Research program. Have you read Thomas Brogardis's stuff on Evans's reference drift?
What does that say right there? What does that say to Cameron, by the way?
Good God. Can you mute this clown?
Is Dr. Trent okay with discussing dogmatic teaching? That's what the text says. He wants me to be muted because I asked Cameron this question.
What state are you in, Jay? Jay, what state are you in?
I'm not doxing myself to your idiot ass. Shut up.
Well, I can't find you by knowing what state you're in. I want to know how far it would be.
You don't need to know anything about me. You don't need to know anything about me.
Jay, I said that we did.
I'm not willing to travel to Texas.
I'm not meeting you.
Would you be willing to travel to Texas if I paid for it?
No, I'm not going anywhere near your ass. Are you serious?
Do you have any boxing experience or
do you want to fight?
Let's not do that. Let's try to stick to arguments. Let's try to stick to the debate topic.
I noticed that everybody, even Cameron and Father Ananias, was laughing about that. But All right, thoughts on that, man?
Right. So again, obviously, as you could see from the clip, I found that very humorous, especially at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, right. I mean, I would have appreciated us bringing it back to the issues much quicker than,
of course.
Right, because there's a difference between like shutting Jay down and creating your own distracting sideshow.
Yeah.
And maybe Trent went a little bit too in the direction of creating his own distracting sideshow.
You have to. It's almost like you have to create something that's equal to the distraction that Jay created. You know what I mean? And then let it kind of fizzle out. I mean, I'm not endorsing what Trent did, but that's the effect that it had.
Yeah, my impression of him holding up the phone to his camera was, I'm going to ignore that. I don't.
Yeah.
It obviously doesn't bear on anything, but I don't know, right? I mean, I'm not really that great of a debater when it comes to knowing what's rhetorically effective with the hoi polloi. So I don't know. Maybe that is the kind of thing. He's holding up his screen saying, "Oh, look, Cameron agreed to, or Trent agreed to talk about these Catholic dogmatic documents, and now he's not talking about them, or he's not letting me use them in the way that I want to use them. This is fundamentally unfair, blah, blah, blah." I gather that probably was effective for Jay's followers, people who already think that he can say or do no wrong. And maybe that did need to be rhetorically combated in some way that Trent was attempting to do. I was content to just ignore that, but maybe that was a rhetorical error on my part. But yeah, this gets back to why.
Are you saying you don't have like debate experience? You don't have rhetoric experience?
Yeah, like I'm not. Well,
you don't have any boxing experience.
What I'm saying is, like, when it comes to being able to phrase things or react to things in a way that's going to be convincing to people who aren't philosophers,
right?
I'm probably not your guy. Right? Like, and I'm never going to be your guy. Oops. Oh wait, do you still have me?
Yep, you're still here.
Okay, great. Okay, my screen went dark for a moment. I don't. So I'm never going to be. There are people who excel at doing both, I think, to some extent. Like William Lane Craig.
Let me say this. So it is a real art. Having done this on YouTube for about a year, I realize like I still teach at university. I still publish, research, and write, and so on. Conference when I can. But I've been transitioning into the YouTube sphere, and man, it is a different beast. Because like, you go get your doctorate and you learn your area, your discipline, you learn the content, and then it's another difficulty because you have to learn to teach it to people who kind of probably just hadn't had a philosophy class ever, and so you got to make it like pitch it at their level. YouTube's a different beast because you've got to like learn video and audio. You got to learn lighting. You got to learn like marketing, like we were talking earlier. You got to know what's going to attract people. And then if you're not careful, I think you can lose your soul in the process. I'm trying not to do that, but it is different because it's like you have to make things clickbaity, or you have to decide whether you want it to be clickbait or whether you want it to say true to your craft. But if you do that, people aren't going to watch. So it's like this. You've got to find some compromise, and the people. Here's the thing: like at a university, your students are forced to be there. They're not going to get the grade. Viewers on YouTube, they can leave whenever they want, and at a university, like you don't have to market to people. The university markets to them, like the name, the reputation, and everything, and you're just a part of that machine. YouTube, like nobody's cheering you on, nobody's marketing for you, and so I can see why creators can lose their soul in the process, or maybe somebody like Jay is just formed in that sort of arena already, so they didn't get the education, and then people growing up in that Vinny commentaries you see online just kind of, they think that's how it's supposed to be done, like this really low level of discourse, and they don't realize that like there's a lot of machinery underneath all this like display, you know what I mean? Like somebody like William Lane Craig, he's got 2 doctorates, man. Like he knows what he's doing, and he's really eloquent and good with the presentation and can debate this really well with others. But he's not going to be, it's like you mentioned Proust earlier, they're not going to be somebody who, crafts like the most visually stunning and engaging YouTube videos. It's just a different skill.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are, yeah, I'll just be honest. Like, I don't think anybody in philosophy on YouTube does this well. Like, at least, like, there are certain channels like Capturing Christianity and other channels like it that do philosophical debates and interviews and stuff like that. But those are usually framed around, what the hot topics are with popular audiences at that time.
Right.
I'm not aware of any channel on YouTube that does a good job with good presentation and good production value of systematically teaching and presenting philosophical content. And I spend probably too much time on YouTube. So,
the one that I can think comes
across this.
The one I think of that comes even remotely close is somebody like Rob Coons. No, Dan Bonneback, sorry. So Dan Bonneback's got a channel called Philo of Alexandria. And it started off as classroom lectures. He's been doing it for like 15 years. So he's got a little bit more experience. But even then, they're not like these really highly produced, probably just a one-man show. He hasn't posted in like 8 months. And but it's like really highly engaging, high-level scholarship that he's putting on camera, which is great. And they get tons of views, but it's just like you get like a Ken Burns scroll of a still photo or something like that. It's like it's like documentary level stuff.
So I think this probably can be done. It takes an enormous amount of effort.
Yep.
And one reason I think it can be done is because I follow YouTube channels that do this for other academic disciplines. There's an excellent, I have a background in mathematics. I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics. I follow a YouTube channel that does an astoundingly good job of presenting mathematics in a way that I think is both almost pretty much as rigorous as what you would encounter in a university classroom, but also very engaging and with solid production value. And the guy has like so much content on there now where it's well organized, systematically organized. You could basically, if you put the effort into it, learn most, if not all, of what you would learn from an undergraduate math degree from his YouTube channel. And other channels I follow.
What's the name of it?
What is the name of it now? Hold on, let me find it.
There's somebody who does this for history too. It's like Mr. History or something like that. The one of my students sent to me, and it helps you like learn AP history or something.
So his name is Michael Penn, Penn, and the YouTube channel is just Michael Penn Math, and or that's his handle on that's his handle on YouTube. So that's excellent. And then there's other channels that I follow on like physics, for example, like the PBS Space-Time channel is great for physics, and it's hosted by Ph.D. physicists and so forth, and other channels that do a really good job with physics. I just know about math and physics because those are my intellectual hobbies. But so I know for sure that it has been done with other academic disciplines. I'll check out the channel you mentioned. But I have yet to see anyone do a good, comprehensive, systematic job of this with philosophy. Although I think it can be done, it's just difficult.
So
what you end up getting?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, what you end up getting instead are like just people who want to have debates or interviews on this topic and that topic, and which are often topics that presuppose an enormous amount of background and systematic and historical,
and leads to conflict, right? Because people want to say what they want to say, and they don't realize that beneath this is a presupposition you got to work out, and you're just talking past each other.
Some of it is just as you said earlier, the lizard brain, where people really just want to see verbal sparring against a background of pseudo intellectual engagement, and if that's what you're looking for, then I think you got a little bit of that certainly from the debate, where people people who are just a little bit interested in philosophy want to watch a debate like that, maybe for the same reason someone who has a passing interest in football wants to watch the Super Bowl, and you just want to see your team beat up the other team. You're not that interested in the technicalities of football or the history and so forth and so on.
So
right?
Do you think? Let me ask. Do you think you can do the debate can be done well? Because I've been floating about this question for a while and commented upon it in the last few videos of my own, and I see the value of it, and I've had people tell me this. They're like, it's easier because you get both sides, like rather than just listen to one person. So it seems a little bit more authentic, because if I'm just up here telling you my views on something, it's hard to really fact check that. And you can't see like where my blind spots are, where if I have somebody who's a foil there can help do that, and we can talk through things. So I can see the value of that, but you like debate proper. So what I'm doing now on my channel, it's like, I don't even hold debates. I hold discussions. Like this is one of them, of course, but like I hold like live office hours where I just have people come on and I'm like, caution, caution, caution. Note, this is not a debate. Debate is a mastered skill. It's a rhetorical skill. I never learned it, not interested in learning it. You have to be really good at it, and I'm not going to do it. And so I'll have a discussion with you. And I think, so somebody mentioned this to me. They used the analogy of speed chess when it comes to debate. It's like speed chess in the sense that you may be able to beat a grandmaster because they might make a mistake. You're not going to get this high level philosophy where it's done rigorously in a peer reviewed journal. You're not going to get that in a debate. And so somebody who's like punch, 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 they're just looking for the other person to make a mistake. And so it has some value perhaps, but you're not going to get any very deep. You're going to stay very surface level.
So it depends on what you want to do, right? So if you want to just have the most rigorous philosophical discussions and debates possible, then those are going to be occurring in books and in journals, period, right? Like that's where they occur. And if you think that you can have an engagement at that same level of rigor on YouTube, you're simply mistaken. It's not going to happen. Now, that's not to say, of course, you can't have a debate on YouTube or elsewhere that is quite rigorous and worthwhile, right? So like if you're trying to strike the reason I do things like this myself is because I do think it's worth promoting awareness of philosophy in public, right? And
especially these theological issues as well that are really,
of course, right. Insofar as it supports, insofar as I guess I'm trying as a philosopher to be a good handmaid into theology. Right. I want to promote philosophical awareness and so forth, and mostly invite people to become interested enough in philosophy to actually start reading philosophy, right? So
but
that's
it
why
means to an end.
Right. Yeah, that's why and also I guess some of my motivation is just it's fun and low stakes. It's a fun low stakes way of doing philosophy. I don't have to deal with all the pressure and and complications that come along with actually getting something published and so forth. So it can be fun in that way. So Yeah, I think you just have to understand what this medium is, right?
Yep.
It's for a popular audience. The rigor, the top level of rigor is just not going to be there. Of course, there are good ways of trying to maintain some level of rigor that I would have liked to see more of in that debate, right?
We saw some of it, which was really excellent, honestly.
It would have been good to just have more structure, for one thing, right? That 5 minutes each person and then just a free-for-all was too loose. It would have been helpful to have more structure, more time for an opening statement.
Yeah, for
sure. More rigorous guidelines on who can speak when, and an opportunity to explicitly interrogate the opposing side instead of just and some enforcement on making them actually making the other side answer questions, not just go off on a tangent about, and all of that will require a moderator who is themselves has some level of philosophical training to know when a question is being avoided and so forth. So yeah, I think it can be done, of course, right? And this gets back to what I said earlier. But that's never going to get as many clicks as a free-for-all.
Exactly.
It's never going to get as many clicks. It never will. And there's no world in which that's going to get as many clicks as a free-for-all. And if you don't understand that, it's in part because you need to read Plato. Right? I mean, this is just how human beings are, right? The lion's share of human beings are never going to be interested in rigorous philosophical debate. You might get enough people interested in philosophical sparring that looks like rigorous debate to be able to make a living off of it on YouTube, but you're never going to get a huge number of people who are interested in diving deep on the philosophical details of a question like this, right?
And you often get people who will, if you try to turn them to the books, the journals, they will just accuse you of appeal to authority or something. And it's like, well, make your argument here. And it's like, dude, this is like a 150 character limit or something. It's like, you can't do that. And they don't understand. And then they've got very little philosophical training, enough to just make them stupid or make them, hurt themselves. And they're going to call out things that aren't really fallacies. That's not a fallacy. The argument of authority is like only applies when it's not a relevant authority. This is a relevant authority. You need to go look at it. But it's also like the part of the challenge is like, answer my question, answer everything about it, or else you failed. And I see this attitude in debates too. It's like well, you said earlier, it's like
it's not just it's answer my question and answer everything about it, but don't tell me to read your published stuff. Which is like, well, it's what you're asking me to basically reproduce word for word all my published stuff on Twitter. You just want me to do a Twitter thread of my published work? Is that what you want?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like this laziness.
I'm happy to send it to you. I'm happy to send it to you for free if that's the issue. It's just,
because that's where your best work is. Obviously, it's been peer reviewed, went through tons and tons of revisions. But it's almost this laziness, unfortunately. I hate to use that term, but this idea that people want you to kind of do tricks, perform for them. Yeah. And then, do it now. I'm not going to look up your stuff. And then in debates, it's like, it's almost like they think it's such a high stakes because they're only maybe going to watch this debate. They don't want to read other stuff. They maybe don't even want to look at other debates you've been in. And if you can't answer every single little thing that has, been challenged to you, even illegitimately challenged to you, then you've somehow failed or something. And that's kind of the thing, the rubric that they're working with to evaluate you in, and it's totally inappropriate.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just, and look, to be clear, and I tell my introduction to philosophy students this all the time. Not everybody has to be a philosopher. Not everybody can be a philosopher. Right? And most people are going to be too busy in life to even have any kind of significant philosophical hobby where they follow, philosophy informally and so forth. And that's fine, right? I'm not, I don't want anybody to think, everybody has to read all my stuff or has to read philosophy generally. I think, philosophy does stand apart from most other academic disciplines in that at least some passing formation in philosophy is a necessary condition of leading a fully flourishing human life. And so philosophy is different in this respect than, say, biology or sociology or physics and so forth. But I'm not, I don't imagine that everybody has to be a philosopher or even has to have a philosophical hobby. But again, this gets back to like, okay, I mean, but I do want people to have enough of self-awareness to know that they are not trained philosophers. And so if they want to hold opinions about philosophical matters, they should, not necessarily just conform their opinion to philosophical authority, because that's against the spirit of the philosophical project. But you should really think hard before, going on a tweet storm about how someone who is a trained philosopher is obviously wrong about some, egregiously wrong about some elemental area of
rigid designation or something.
Like rigid designation or something like that. That's not a good idea. Right. So there should just be, you can either get involved in philosophy and really do the hard work and have the discipline necessary to do the hard work to know this stuff. And that doesn't necessarily have to take the form of getting a graduate degree in philosophy. I know lots of people. I know a fair number of people who know much more than any of my undergrads do about philosophy, who never got any degree in philosophy. That's all well and good. But it does require a significant amount of discipline and so forth. And if you have other priorities in life, if that's not something you have the time and energy and resources to undertake, that's also fine. But just be aware.
Acknowledge it.
Acknowledge that's where you are in terms of philosophical expertise, and that people are going to take that into account when weighting your opinion against someone who does have that philosophical expertise.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, and you mentioned something at the very beginning. We'll wrap up here soon, but and I'll let you have the last word. But you said something at the beginning with respect to gatekeeping. It's not as if academics are trying to gatekeep. It's just I think people don't realize that there's a level of excellence when it comes to being, at a certain level in philosophy, and they write it off as like philosophy. There are no answers. It's all subjective, which is completely wrong. And after your first philosophy class, you should realize that's completely wrong. So it's a disrespect there. But speaking of gatekeeping, when you were talking about this earlier, it made me think of the difference between us. It's like, not everybody needs a certificate to tell them how good they are, or, there might be people who are uneducated. And this reminded me of when we first both started at Baylor. We were both in the same cohort in 2015. Your test scores were like way better than mine. And you're like, when it came to the application, they were like top of the pile. That guy scores really, really well. Like, because those are like objective evaluations. So they're meant much like degrees, and in the real world now. It's like, okay, the top of the pile should at least give this guy a listen. But there are people like, like me, like other people like I know, who we'll use Brandon as an example. He had like record low scores, like when it came to like GRE and stuff. Mine weren't that hot either. They were really low near the pile.
Way to put Brandon on blast. Even here.
I am putting him on blast for a reason, though, because he will even acknowledge this. He'll say this publicly, because yes, they had to read his actual stuff. It's like, okay, maybe we don't get, but let's look into him. And turns out they were like, okay, let's give him a shot. They accepted him into the program. Awesome choice for them, because he ended up like having the most publication as a grad student to ever graduate the program. And he got the dissertation award, not just for the department, but university wide, I think, like best dissertation of that year. And he ended up really excelling in ways that like nobody would have seen coming if they had only read, like been like, okay, his certifications are at this level, let's not pay attention to people. So all that to say, sometimes people, will surprise you. They may not have the doctorates. And so, yeah, listen to them sometimes. But for the most part, like having a doctorate, having certain level of education is like a really good indicator. And you'll be surprised every once in a while, but it's not. Yeah.
Right. I'd love to live in a world where I could sit down and just give
infinite time and look at everyone. Yep.
Yeah. Like, right. And just assess everybody's level of philosophical expertise firsthand through having conversations with them.
Right.
But that I don't have anywhere near that amount of time. So when I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to interact with this person, I'm not going to interact with this person, I'm going to answer, and other academics will know this, right? But people who aren't academics won't know this. You get, when you're an academic, you get emails from kooks like all the time. I had some dude send me, this was, I think, just about a year ago, some dude sent me his 250-page book, and it was all, I can't even remember what was in it, but I remember
you read all of it, right? Cover to cover.
I skimmed the first 5 pages.
Yeah.
And I understood everything I needed to understand about that book. Right. And it's just like insane to me that I guess people think that I have the time to sit and read like unsolicited manuscripts from people that I don't even know who they are, what their qualifications are. So and to be clear, right? Like when I'm saying, education is important, I'm not saying that degrees are what are important. Like if you were to ask me, like if someone just beamed down from nowhere and had said, Christopher, I want you to show me that you're really a trained philosopher, right? What am I going to do? I'm not going to show them my diploma from Baylor. Right. I'll call Alex Bruce and tell him, Alex, I need you to explain to this guy that I'm legit. Right. And so what this is really about is not, it's not about institutional certification. Right. It's about what happens in the institution, right? Having the, if you want to put it this way, right, having this kind of discipleship or apprenticeship with people who everybody in the world basically agrees they know what they're doing, right? And that's basically what doing a PhD is, right? It's like I went to this department, I worked with this person whom everybody in the world is basically agreed he knows what he's doing, and he now says that I know what I'm doing, right? And so it's really just a sophisticated form of people vouching for other people after a period of apprenticeship, and that's what I think is valuable. That's what I think
that's a great point.
Signifies expertise. It's not the fact that after that was all said and done, Baylor printed a diploma for me, right? Like that's not what matters, right?
It's a great point. It reminds me, I probably need to write an email to my dissertation advisor, Dr. Evans. It's been a while.
So that's having, and it's not just obviously about your dissertation director. It's about being in that community for 4, 5, 6 years, 7 or 8 if you're really slow. Where you're not just learning from people who are acknowledged to know what they're doing, but you're also learning from your peers. That's an important element of it as well, and so forth. And just inhabiting that community for a number of years without doing anything else, right? Without working a 9 to 5 on the side, because if you really want to get good at this, that's real. I mean, that's the level of, think about when people, it's helpful here to, I think, compare it with becoming holy, right? Like when people
Yeah,
are really
great.
serious about getting holy, what do? Well, they go join a community and close themselves off from other worldly pursuits for not just years at a time, but the duration of their natural lives, right? To like,
Yeah.
I'm going to get good at this, right? Together
Yeah.
with other people who are already acknowledged to be good at this. And, you know, obviously we would think there's something really weird or actually essentially incompatible about the process. If, you know, someone said, you know, I'm a monk, but I'm also, you know, a lawyer. That's my day job. You know, I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm out here defending HMOs against lawsuits or whatever. And I'm just a monk back at home. It's like, that obviously, right? Like, that's not how it works. You have to really isolate yourself from other pursuits for a period of time, at least, during what you would call a postulancy and novitiate in religious life, and becoming an expert in philosophy or other academic disciplines is similar, right? I mean, it requires this kind of single-mindedness for a period of time, a number of years, and then you can kind of rejoin the world, so to speak. And I understand, you know, that's an obstacle for some people who are otherwise very interested in philosophy, where they're like, I have a job, I have children I have to care for, I can't move away and just dedicate 5 years of my life to this, and so forth and so on. And I totally understand that, but I guess I also want other people to understand there are certain intellectual goods that can only really come to full fruition in the ordinary case, at least in communities like that, where you've kind of abandoned other worldly pursuits and dedicated yourself single-mindedly to this intellectual project for a number of years. And that's what I take a PhD to represent, right? It's not about, it's not about a diploma or a university gave me a piece of paper. It's about dedicating myself single-mindedly to a community that is full of other people who are very good at this and equally single-minded about it, in a way that's going to really allow me to be formed in that intellectual tradition.
Man, that I've never thought about that. That's such an excellent way to put it. I'll have to do some more thinking about that. How it's so similar to a novitiate, to an apprenticeship, to become a holy, has all these parallels. And you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, right? Given that the birth of the Western University came from
true.
The tradition.
That's true. So, man, I'm so glad you came on. I'll give you the last word here. But I'm really, really appreciative because we don't talk enough, Christopher. We text all the time, of course, but like this has been such an enjoyable conversation. This is probably the longest, like, you know, if they had dorm rooms there at the grad school or something, but like, you know, who has 2 hours to like take away from reading and writing and teaching and all that. So I'm really appreciative during the summer you were able to have this time to give to me. I last saw you in, what was it, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago in Philly. We had a nice chat among friends there, and then so this has been especially helpful and enjoyable and special. So I've appreciated it. But anyway, you want to go ahead and give the last word here, and we'll.
It's thanks for having me on, and it's very nice to be able to have a serious philosophical discussion and not just meeting up, for baptisms or memes on Facebook.
Yeah, seriously. We'll have to do it again, man. I appreciate you, and we'll end it there. So, all right, talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care.
Thanks.
Bye.